Welcome back to the Just Keep It Real podcast. I'm your host, Makayla, and welcome. We're going to start with our second episode, and the title is Isolation. Now, I do have a special guest, and her name is Nathania. Me and her, we work together, and I'm going to let her just share a little bit of her background with us. Hi, Nathania. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, good. Awesome.
That's good. So, we're just go ahead. You can just give the people like a little small information about you and everything.
Sure. So, as she already said, my name is Nathania Simien. Currently work for UTA, wife of 10 years, mom of three. Um, just now went back to college and so just living my life.
Alrighty. So she's gonna be joining us today, and she's gonna go along with this journey. We're gonna talk about isolation. Now, when we get into this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, invite somebody else to come out to the podcast, and let's just spread the word, spread the message, so we could get the followers going. I do love the support that I got from the last episode. Thank you guys for commenting. Thank you guys for spamming, and I got a lot of good feedback from the first episode, and we're gonna just keep on going with that. But we're
Awesome.
not gonna prolong the time. Let's go ahead and get to the video. So, Nathania, I do have some questions for you
Of
regarding the
course.
topic of isolation. So, what are some things that you learned during your season of isolation?
So, in my season of isolation, um, I learned how to hear more. And when I say hear more, I open myself up to be able to um, listen to hear and understand instead of listen to respond. And also listen to the Holy Spirit a lot clearer um, than I used to. I learned how to sit and just be quiet and focus on me in my season of isolation.
Okay, that's good. I can relate a lot to that because I remember when my season of isolation. So, let's just keep it real. When I was from the age of 12 all the way up to the age of 18, I was one of the popular girls. I was always in a crowd, I was always the center of attention. So, from somebody going from being socially involved a lot to being now just being isolated, I had a hard time adjusting to that.
Mm,
But with me being isolated, there's some things I learned of just learning how to be quiet.
right. And
Because
see for oh go ahead.
yeah, learning how to be quiet for me because I like to talk a lot. So
Hmm.
one thing that came down to me is that if you talk all the time, you're not listening because you're
Hmm.
so focused on just getting your point across and not hearing what the other person has to say.
Yeah. Yep.
That took a
And
long time for me to learn.
that's so true. It's very true. And see, for me, I've never been the popular type or one, but I always wanted to be with the popular kids. And so I would try and fit in. And so I was so busy trying to fit in that I never really just focused on you good by. And it wasn't until I got, I would say maybe into my mid 20s that I really just was like, okay, I'm good by myself.
Oh, yes. That was hard for me because I couldn't understand why God isolated me, especially because He did it for me at a young age. He
Hmm.
did. I entered my season of isolation at the age of 19.
Mm.
So that was like right after I had just graduated from high school. And mind you, high school, popular child, in a clique with amongst other women, sports, center of attention. So at the age of 19, I didn't understand why I was isolated. Another
Hmm.
question I want to ask you, Nathania, what are some things when you enter your season isolation, what are some things that you struggle with?
Um, being still
Mm,
because I'm one who has to move around. I'm always on go, always doing something. Like, with three kids, it's always something to do. They range from one that will be 12 come December. I have a 7-year old and a 9-year old. And so I'm always on go. They're always keeping me on my toes. And so just having to be still in that isolation was definitely a struggle. And even when I will say in the early part of my 20s and my teens, when I had to be still, that was something that was tough because I always wanted to move around and I had to do something. And so just to sit and be still, I would definitely say is one of the biggest struggles.
That's the same with me. It is the same thing with me. Was learning how to just stop. And
Hmm.
like I said, you go from being the social part to going into just being you and understanding what it means to really be by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I also feel like if you're always around people, you can never really hear from God. Because
Mm,
how can you hear from God if you got all these distractions around you?
yes.
So that's one thing with me I struggled with in my season of isolation was being still. And then my problem was, I don't know if you had this problem, but I always try to get out of my season of isolation. I was not embracing it when it first happened. I was always trying to find me something to do. But it's like every time I looked for something, I always end up getting in trouble or something always went left.
Hmm.
So it's not until I got a little bit older when I really started understanding why I was in my season of isolation.
Mm,
Because I went to Mountain View after high school. So right in there, it's a very boring school, but I knew the right people. So it
yeah.
wasn't boring for me. So I remember I used to cut class and go to parties. I used to cut class and go hang out with other people just because I didn't like being by myself. I
Hmm.
couldn't handle being by myself. I'm just like, you know what? I'm coming from a social popular environment. Like I was the crowd. I was a part of a crowd. Now I'm
Mm,
coming to a small school where there's a lot of people, but you really don't know that many people. So
right.
I'm just making connections with people just for me to fill that void of being alone. I didn't like being alone.
Mm,
So when it came down with me, it's not until that what I was doing started catching up with me.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
started under like I said, even though with me cutting class to go hang out with people, it will always back up either because I would start failing or spiritually I was being more attacked because now I
Mm,
was getting attacked with different things that I was open different portals to.
yeah.
Then on top of that, with me cutting and do what I was doing, going to parties, it wasn't really doing nothing. Yes, I had fun temporarily, but it's just like the whole grew. So I was like, I
Hmm.
wanted to do more. And
Yeah.
it's not until I got in my 20s is when I started really slowing down
Hmm.
because I kept going and going and going and going and going. And then when I
Right.
finally hit 20 and a half, like, because I had just turned 20, it was a few months after that, I
Hmm.
really started getting serious. Like, understanding, like, okay, what is life really about? Understanding, like, okay, I can't do anything else because I've tried everything. I tried partying, that didn't work. I tried dating, that didn't work. I tried just hanging out with people that I used to hang out with, that didn't work. It's like nothing I was doing to get me out of isolation wasn't working for me.
Mm. So you ain't have a choice but to be still.
They didn't have a choice but to be still because even then, like I was a busybody. I always had to do something. And like with
Yeah.
me being so isolated, I was just like, you could like it's like your world just stopped. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
what? Like I wasn't the talk, it wasn't like a topic of the town, like, oh yeah, we're gonna go do this, we're gonna do that. Like every weekend, I was always gone. I was
Hmm.
always doing something. So I went from doing that to not doing anything at all, just being at home all the time. And I'm just like,
Right.
what is this? Like, no, I cannot live like this. Like,
Right.
I gotta go out and do some things. But I thank God that he caught me at a young age
Hmm.
because even though I did my formal way of partying, because everybody has their different definitions of partying,
Hmm.
but the way I did it, by the time I reached 21, I didn't have a party mentality.
Mm.
So there's certain things I went through in my first 2 years of isolation that I just I'm a very rebellious person. At the time, I was not trying to hear nothing that nobody was telling me. I was just like, you know what? I hear you, but I don't want to hear you, so I'm just gonna do what I want to do.
Right. Right.
But God has a way of catching your attention.
Yes, he does. He
And I
surely
remember,
does.
I'm telling you. I remember this day like it was yesterday. I can tell you like the time of everything. I went to church this one particular Sunday because I was born and raised at church. So
Mhm.
this church that we go to now, I was at church and my bishop had preached this sermon called No More Lip Service, pretty much saying if you're saying you're saved, you need to live that lifestyle. You can't say it if you're not living it.
Mhm.
And at the time, that's what I was doing. I mean, of course, I grew up in church, so I was just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna just do this, this, that, and God still knows my heart, but I just feel like at that time he wanted something deeper from me, but
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it because I was still like, first of all, God, you didn't isolate me. You done took all my social ability from me. I'm not a social person anymore. Like you stripped me from all my friends. You stripped me from everybody that I was talking to. Because me growing up, like I said, Nathania, my phone was never dry. Like I always had somebody to talk to. So
Yeah.
it went from being like my phone would just be lit up to like my phone is dry. I'm just like, what is this? What is this? I was not trying to hear it at all. I was not
Oh.
trying to hear it. But it was literally in that moment when when after by the time he had opened for altar call, I dang near ran down there to get to that altar. I was like, oh my God. Like it's like it really clicked to me
Mhm. Yeah.
what everything that I was doing. And I feel like in that moment, I went through so much of that season of isolation for God to get me to that point.
Yeah.
Because at
Yeah.
that point, I had got tired of doing what I was doing because nothing
Mhm.
was working for me. So once I made that switch and I like everything came to me and I like rededicated my life back to him, I was like, okay. Then that's not until then I started really understanding why
Mhm.
I'm isolated.
Yeah.
What are some things you feel? What do you feel like isolation is? What does isolation look like for you?
Um, I will say for me, my isolation was not being able to help, not being needed. And so my phone has never been one to go off the hook. But when it does, it's because someone needs me.
Mhm,
And so I would say my biggest moment of isolation would have been during the quarantine time and when
mhm,
I had got COVID. Now, that COVID knocked me on my tail, and it was nobody but me in the room. And so the kids couldn't come and say, well, mom, I need you. My husband couldn't say, oh, I need you to do this. Nobody could call me and say, I need you. And so my form of isolation is literally being by yourself. And so you have no choice but to commune with God, or discover things about yourself that you may not have tapped into yet. And that is exactly what I did during those times of studying and praying. Um, that was my form of isolation, and it was literal isolation, just me by myself, communing with God the entire time. And so, um, yes, that would be my definition: is when you are truly alone, when it is truly just you. Nobody is calling saying, I need you for this, I need advice for this. It's just you and God.
yes, my form of isolation is to piggyback on what you said. Yes, being alone, but with me, my way of isolation was you're saying when nobody needs you, but it's like when nobody's calling you. That's how it was
Hmm.
for me. Nobody was calling me. Nobody was telling me, let's go here, let's go there. It's like my life had literally stopped because I had
Yeah.
a very, very popular social life. Like I was very involved with a lot of stuff that I was doing. And
Hmm.
I knew all the right people. So I went from my phone ringing all the time to I barely get text messages. I only get one, maybe three calls a day. And it's not even from friends, it's from family members.
Mm.
So my form of isolation like with me is like because I was always focused on the go,
Yeah.
always thinking about doing something with somebody else or hanging out or just being out there.
Hmm.
It's not until like God took all that away from me. And like the way he did it, I could see why. Because he stripped me. He took everything. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, I'm thinking like, oh my God, you could have took like maybe 2 or 3 people. You didn't have to take everybody. But it's just like the way it happened. It's just like you wake up popular and you go to sleep and you wake up as a normal person. It's like it was like
Yeah.
it was like a whole shift.
Yeah.
So I went from being the topic of hearing everything and trying to go to now it's just me and God.
Mm.
So this time through my isolation, at first I was not embracing my isolation. But then once I started understanding why I was isolated, I learned so much about myself. And I feel
Yeah.
like when you are isolated where it's just you and God, that's the best time really. Cuz you learn so much about yourself. I mean, you can
Mhm.
learn so much about yourself, but it's like when you really have that time alone and
Yeah.
there's nobody around you, it's just you and God, there's so many things you can learn about him and you can also learn about yourself.
Yes. I
And
agree.
that's so what are some things you feel like you learned about yourself in your season of isolation?
What I learned about myself is I learned my boundaries, what I like and dislike,
Mm-hmm.
what I will accept and what I won't accept. And so I learned, I will say, how to assert my boundaries and how to open up my mouth, because my mouth is not meant to be closed. And so, and as they always used to say, closed mouth don't get fed. And
Yes.
so if you do not tell, or, put your boundaries out there, then people will just run all over you. And so in my moment of isolation, I learned what my boundaries were. I learned what I would accept and what I would no longer accept. And I learned the power of no. Now I'm still working on my no's,
Mm-hmm.
but
You and me both.
I learned the power of no and being able to say, well, no, I cannot do that. And so and not feeling bad about it because I know what I can and cannot do. So that will be the biggest thing I would say is learning my boundaries, learning my strengths and a lot of my weaknesses, learning that, you know, I don't have to be there for everybody. I
Mm-hmm.
have to take care of myself. I learned how to put me first in that moment, because if I had have been taking care of myself, I probably wouldn't have been down for the count in the first place. And
Mm-hmm.
so um I learned how to put me first. I learned those, ways to care for myself. And
Yeah.
so I learned the necessity of spending time alone. And so those, I would say, the biggest things was my boundaries, learning, how to be alone, and, self-care.
That is so relatable to what I learned. I learned boundaries as well. And one thing I can say that I learned deeper about my boundaries is understanding what boundaries are and how to set them and how to
Mhm.
stick to them.
Mhm.
Because when it comes up to me, I'm always trying to help somebody. The word no wouldn't apply to me. Now I'm still working on my no too. I say no a little bit too much in certain situations. I'm just like,
Yeah,
no, not
yeah.
doing that, not doing that. But one thing I did learn, because from me, just being real, I started dating at the age of 12. Too young to comprehend anything at this
Mhm.
point. But from 12 to up, I encountered so many different things, like
Mhm.
being cheated on, being lied to, being disrespected. So once I was isolated, I had to understand what healthy boundaries are and what they look like,
Right.
and how do you need and how to stick to them. And I also learned the difference between a real person and a fake person,
Oh yeah.
because growing up in high school, I mean, I had to see a point in my life in junior high where I was one of those fake people. Like, I could not be trusted. But it's because I was coming from a place where people was doing that to me. So I just came back and started doing it to people.
Mm.
Because I'm like, I'm a person, treat me how you want to be treated.
Right.
But if you don't want to treat me with respect, don't expect me to treat you with respect. That's
Mm.
just how I was. But
Mhm.
I really embraced it in junior high. Now I don't grew from that. So now I'm like, you can, if anything, I'll tell you how I feel. And I'm like, listen, do you want me to tell you the truth?
Right.
The brutally honestly truth. So now I'm more brutally honest than ever. I'm still working on taming that and not trying to say things so harsh, but
Mhm.
that's one thing I had to learn was boundaries, what they look like. And another thing was self-love,
Yeah.
understanding. And I had to really, in my season of isolation, I really got to understand who I was and know my worth.
Mhm.
That's like through my whole season, because I'm still isolated now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just look at the beginning stages of my isolation where I really took time to know myself.
Mhm.
Some people say, "Oh, you know yourself," like that. But no, when you really know yourself,
Yeah.
it's a whole nother feeling. And then, of
Mhm.
course, I tapped into how does God see me? How does God view me? And
Mhm.
then I started reading His Word and got more deeper into it.
Yeah.
And when He started showing me and telling me who I was, it just made it easier for me to be more comfortable in who I was.
Right.
Of course, we're not perfect. We're striving for perfection. And of course, we're all have our flaws, but it's like when you tap into knowing who you are and knowing how God sees you, it's so much easier
Mhm.
to just be comfortable in who you are.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing I learned in my season of isolation. I was like, you know what? God created me this way. Yes, He's still working on me because my flesh dies daily, but my inner man is being renewed day by day. So
Mhm.
I know even as I continue to take off the old man and put on the new man, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. So I know there's still some things that He's still working on me on,
Yeah.
which it's a process. But I feel like when I finally got comfortable with being who I was, because of course I struggle with just being real. I struggle with identity crisis because I always would see how other people were and I would try to mimic them and try to
Mhm.
do what they did just to get the same attention that they got. Like I said, I'm popular, really, like I had to be the center of attention.
Yeah.
But once I really got isolated and understood who I was, I became so much comfortable in just
Yeah.
being me. I'm like, listen, there's no other person other than me. It don't get no better than me. I was like, God, after you made me, you broke the mold. I mean, I just had to kind of, because I always got the persona of people saying like, oh, you're weird, you're too this, you're too that. And of course, when you hear that all the time, you start to want to change yourself. That's
Mhm.
the thing that I struggled with and wanted to do all the time. But when I really got comfortable with myself and like, you know what, this is just me. I'm a goofy person. I'm a blunt person. This and this and that. I'm good. If you don't
Yeah.
like me, oh well. But I feel like that's one of the important things that I'm grateful that I learned from my season of isolation. I also learned what it like to separate, because I always couldn't keep like a separate life.
Mhm.
Like I always would combine, like, you have your work life and your social life and then your home life. And like I combined them all in one, which wasn't a good thing for me because I get overwhelmed a lot.
Mhm.
So when it came down to certain things that I would bring home with me, I was like, I was getting beat up out there, then I try to come home for some peace, and I'm getting beat up at home. So one thing I had to learn was in my season of isolation is separation,
Mm. That's a
and that's
good one.
separation. That's the crazy thing is separation looks different for other people. So
Mhm.
my separation looked like for me was separation from your work, separation from your social, separation from friends, and separation from family. Like there has to be a separation between the two. It cannot
Mhm.
be merged. Like you cannot merge everything into one, because some people don't see how you see them, and they don't view everything the way you view it. And that's
Mhm.
something I had to learn the hard way when I called myself working in this job. I mean, it was good at first, but it just grew toxic day by day, every day. And I brought it home with me. I would go to work and I'll come home with it, and it's like I didn't have no peace at
Mm.
all. I would wake up with anxiety attacks, and it's just like the separation had to be there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when God separates you from something, just stay separated from it.
Oh yeah.
Because oof, I done picked some stuff up that He done separated me from, and that was not the best idea. Because
Yeah.
it's like you never get the same thing. It's like you get
Mhm.
that plus like 10 more. And I'm just like, oh my
Mhm.
God. It's like you add problems on top of problems on top of problems. And like coping from in the way I dealt with it wasn't healthy. So I was just adding more problems to the problem I already had. I done made a
Yeah.
bigger problem just not having that separation. And one thing I learned through my season of isolation is putting your foot down and standing on it.
Oh yeah.
Because one thing about me, I'll put my foot down, but I wouldn't stand on it. I'll compromise. But one thing I had to learn is people will take you for granted.
Mhm.
They take your kindness for weakness, and then I'm very kind hearted.
Yeah.
You see me at work, so I'm very kind hearted, and I always the type of person. I'm always want to be there. I always want to be helpful to anybody,
Yeah.
but people don't see that as you doing this at the kindness of your heart. They see it as you're weak. They see it as,
Mhm.
hey, what can I get out of her? And I had a lot of people take advantage of me and like take my kindness for weakness. So one thing is not, I prolonged it with me just like not nipping it in the bud right then and there. Like I
Mhm.
let the problem grow. And I feel like, if I would have just put my foot down right then and there, this wouldn't have happened. So one thing, I'm still working on that now, but one thing I learned is when you put your foot down, you have to stand behind it. You
Oh yeah.
cannot switch, you cannot change. You have to stay with it. And I feel like once you've done that, the person can respect you better because they know that you're not
Mhm.
going to let this slide.
Yep.
But also, I learned self love. I love me some me. I love me some me. I
Yes.
love me some me. But one thing I learned during my season of isolation, knowing my worth and self love, two biggest things that I'm grateful for that I've learned during this season of isolation.
That's
Because
awesome.
loving myself, and I look at it because like when I was in this relationship, when I met this guy when I was 12 years old, and this was the love of my life from 12 all the way up to like I finally stopped dealing with him when I was like 20 years old, but we were on and off for 3 years. So one thing through that, like I use that as my biggest example because I didn't love myself at that time. I actually lost myself even more by
Mhm.
being with this person because they cheated on me multiple times, and then I just continued to allow it to happen, and it just grew more and more and more and more and more. It just got worse. But with the self love that I have, I was like, how can I expect somebody to love me if I don't love myself?
Mhm.
I can't expect somebody to treat me the way I want them to be treated if I don't know how to treat myself.
Yep.
So when I looked at how I continue to let him cheat on me and talk down to me and just be very negative with me, how can I say this is love?
Mm.
How can I expect somebody else to love me if I'm letting this happen to me? And then like it wasn't just him. It was different people that I've dated that has cheated on me. I'm just like, I continue to let it happen. And it's not until like my grandmother, rest in peace, came and really sat down with me and explained to me what real love meant and what it meant to learn to how to love yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, everybody can tell you advice, but it's like sometimes when somebody has low self-esteem, because that's something I also struggled with at that time was low self-esteem. I didn't love myself. I thought I was
Mhm.
ugly. So I feel like this is the best I could get. It's not until like some people you got to take time out with them and
Yeah.
talk with them and understand why do they feel this way, because
Mhm.
everything is not just an overnight feeling.
Oh yeah.
This has been there. So my granny sat there and took time out with me to understand why did I feel the way that I feel, and
Mhm.
why was I letting this happen to me so many times. Because my granny was like my best friend. Like she was the only person that knew that I was out here dating at such a young age. Because I wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to date till I was 16, but I started at 12.
Oh wow.
But yes, my granny was the only one that knew. But it was just she really took that time out with me, and I'm just so grateful. Like there's some things she taught me. Like I
Yeah.
remember this is the most memorable thing I can ever remember, and I look at this and I just sometimes I get tears to my eyes because literally my granny had this mirror that sat on her dresser.
Mhm.
My granny was blind, but my granny said go in there and get the mirror off the dresser, and I went. And every day before I went to school, she told me to say this same thing over: I am loved, I'm special, I'm a child of God, and I'm different. I said that every single day
Mm.
until where I actually started believing it.
That's
And,
awesome.
and then it was just in that moment, I said that so many times to where once I actually believed it, and of course she prayed with me and encouraged me in different ways, but the fact that I said that so much to where I believed it.
Yeah.
I started believing it. I started actually, okay, like I'm loved. Like,
Mhm.
my family loves me so much. Like
Yeah.
my friends love me so much. God loves me so much.
Mhm.
And like I'm different. It's okay to be different. It's okay to stick out. You could be the like some people say it's always a weird one in the bunch. It's okay to be the weird one.
Yes.
It's okay to embrace yourself. It's okay. It's like
Yes.
I understood how I felt in each of those things I said. I just saw how
Mhm.
I perfectly fit in them. And then
Yeah.
once I learned that, I started loving myself so much that I'm like, I love myself so much where I wouldn't dare put myself in a situation to be treated so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm just like, I know if God won't would never treat me this way, why would I let you treat me this way?
Mhm.
If my own family won't treat me this way, why would I let you treat me this way?
Yeah.
And of course, spending time with yourself. I take myself out on dates. Like sometimes I'm like, you know what? I need a date night. I need to get cute. I need to go to a nice little restaurant and just have dinner
Yeah.
with myself. But I feel like that's healthy too because
It
you don't
is.
have some people I've encountered different people that's gave me their idea of like, oh, they have to have a man take them out, and if they take, it's weird going out by yourself. And I'm not gonna lie, I was one of them at first. I was like, I can't go out by myself. I can't take myself out to a movie. That's weird. Like you're just sitting there by yourself. Like
Yeah.
that's weird. But it's not until I actually did it
Mhm.
I love it. I love just having that time by myself. You don't have to.
Right.
It's just you sitting there. Some people do like they read books there. I mean, I may still go out to a restaurant and just watch a movie by
Right.
myself. Like, but it's just I'm by myself. I'm understanding. I don't have to go out with people. I can take myself out.
Mhm.
That's
You
something.
can.
That's some things like I feel as women we need to understand. Like
Mhm.
sometimes we may not always find some. It's not everybody may not be available. You may not always find somebody, so you just gotta take yourself out. And I feel like that's another thing you could do with self love. Take care of yourself. I always get my hair done, my nails
Yeah.
done, and I always get a pedicure. And then even with that, that's just certain things I learned about myself. I'll take myself shopping. I'll go from store to store to store, and I'll shop by myself and have a great time. At first, I was reluctant to that because I'm just like, ew, that's weird. It's a
Mm.
mall. You're supposed to go with somebody, but
Right.
but when I started doing it more and more, it's so much fun because you just like
Mhm.
it's so much fun just to be by yourself.
Yeah.
It's
Yes, it is.
I love that time by myself because I'm just like it's just me, but it's actually really me and God because I'm never alone. I'm never alone.
Mhm.
And I was
Mm-mm.
like, God, I'll be just sitting there talking, and I just be like, wow, this is so much. It's like you have just a clear mind just sitting there.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
just peace and quiet. I love peace and quiet. Another thing I learned in my season of isolation is to value time.
Oh yes.
Value your time. It's just wow. And with me being young the way that I am, there's a lot of people around my age that are dying, a lot of people around my age they're in different circumstances, like troubling circumstances, and I'm not in that predicament.
Mhm.
And also I looked at it how don't you put so much time into people and so much your energy and focus into things that's not meaningful
Right.
rather than putting your time in something that is meaningful. And
Yeah.
like the time I realize and I understand the time you invested, you can never get that back.
Mm-mm.
And I'm just like, that's one thing I value so much right now is my time. I tell
Yeah.
people all the time, please do not waste my time because I can't get this back. And the
Mm-mm.
time, the energy I'm gonna have to put in to getting some to put into you or to put into this thing, and
Yes.
this doesn't work, I have to
Mhm.
like I can't get that back.
Mm-mm.
And I
Nope.
think about the time I could be doing something else that could be productive for me, and I wasted my time on something that wasn't productive for me.
Right.
But time,
Yeah.
valuing time and understanding time is so
Yeah.
precious.
And I
Time,
wanted to
yeah,
emphasize one of the key things that you said was how your grandmother sat you down and talked to you. And what I notice about, um, I will say, all generations, not very many women have that support or
yeah,
someone who will sit them down and talk to them. You know, there are so many women out here who have no village, and
mm-hmm,
there is an importance of the village just to sit down and say, okay, look, I know where you at. I've
mm-hmm,
been there, but this is how you can get out of it. Or
yeah,
I see you, you know, and that is so important, especially now in the days of social media where you have
mm-hmm,
all these women who have doctored themselves. And
mm-hmm,
so you have so many women trying to strive to be that instead of just being them, you know. And
yes,
so it's key to have that village to say, no, you beautiful just the way you are, you know,
mm-hmm,
to show them like, I see you for you, not for who the world wants you to be. And so that I believe that that's something key and that more women should have is that
yeah.
village.
And that's so important. I completely agree, because I, even though I have a family village, I also have a church village. So
Yeah.
somebody going, if I'm going through something so much, somebody gonna reach me. Somebody gonna be like, hey, what's going on? And like you said, it is so important, because if we don't take the time out to sit down with you have kids. With me, I have a younger sibling, so I always try to make sure I take that time out with her to validate her
Yeah.
and be there for her and let her know that you're beautiful, you're different, it's okay to be yourself and everything. And that's one thing I value that my mom and my family took time to do with me,
Mhm.
because my granny, and especially at this particular time, it was so crucial for me that I didn't understand what I was doing, but she saw it. And the fact that
Mm.
she was able to sit there and take that time out with me and really explain to me what it means. And it does take a lot of patience
Oh
to
yeah.
sit there with somebody. Like, you got to have patience, because you're
Mhm.
not going to get it right away.
Nope.
And it's just, you're not, and you're gonna fall, you're gonna make the same mistakes, but it's just the consistency with being there. And that's what I learned also during isolation, is being consistent.
Yeah.
But just being, having a village that's consistent with you,
Mhm.
consistently pouring into you, letting you know, validating you. Because if we don't sorry if we don't validate our kids, our younger siblings, the younger generation, this the social media will.
Oh yeah. They
They
definitely.
definitely, they definitely will validate them the way they see them, how they're supposed to.
Mhm.
Because at the age of 23, you're supposed to be married with 4 kids, you're supposed to have a house, you're supposed to be in your career, you're supposed to have everything lined up at the age of 23. And I'm just like, I do not fit in that category now one bit. I do not fit in there. I am literally a homebody person. I don't fit in none of that. But that's also, I feel like that plays a part in people,
Yeah.
and especially if they don't understand the season of isolation, because
Mhm.
that had to be explained to me, what isolation meant and what you can do during your season of isolation.
Yeah.
But when it came, but back to validating the youth, it's important,
Mhm.
because they're not gonna understand it. And with
Mm.
my sister, I try to tell her, I mean, she's too young to understand certain things, but I try to break it down to her, say, you treat people with kindness, you treat
Mhm.
people with respect, you treat people with love. You don't be mean to people because they're mean to you. You don't do that. You be you.
Yeah.
And don't change yourself for nobody else. Don't switch up nothing for nobody else. I tell her all the time, I say, if they don't want to play with you, go find you somebody else to play with. And I always
Mhm.
try to instill in her to look for somebody that's not socially popular, because I don't want I don't want my child or my sisters to feel the way that I felt growing up,
Yeah.
the need of attention, the need to be in the crowd,
Mhm.
because it doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
It does not do anything for you. And I would never want them to experience that. So I always try to instill in my sister that don't don't go for the crowd. Look for the
Yeah.
people. Look for one person that doesn't have nobody to play with. Look for that one person that's not talkative, and you go
Mhm.
talk to them and you be their friend.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when the ones that are quiet is the ones you can have a beautiful friendship with,
Mhm.
because y'all in the same boat. But
Yeah. That
that's one
is
thing
true.
that's one thing I try to instill, is validation, and letting her know it's okay to be different. And that's one thing,
Mhm.
like you said, all women should have somebody in their corner validating them.
Yeah.
And if you can't, like, don't seek validation from other people, validate yourself, because it starts
Yeah.
with you.
Mhm.
Get in the
That's
mirror and talk to yourself.
That's big. That is so big. Because
Mm-hmm.
I oftentimes have to talk to my daughter
Mm-hmm.
about it, because when she got into school, and it really didn't start until she got into school. And so, of course, there are a lot of Hispanics and Mexicans.
Mm-hmm.
And so she saw their hair and she's like, well, why isn't my hair like that? Can you make my hair straight like that? And I'm like, no, your hair is beautiful just the way it is. And so I
Mm-hmm.
had to really talk to her and pour into her of how beautiful her hair is just the way it is. I was like, you embrace your natural beauty. I say
Yeah.
your hair is curly. I say your hair can do multiple things. I say if you want to wear it down, you can wear it down. If you want to wear it curly one day, you want to wear a fro, you want to wear braids, you can do that. It's very versatile. And so I have to really pour into her, and she wants to look like them. And I'm like, you can't look like them because that's not how God created you. He
Hmm.
created you to look like you, and you are perfect just the way you are, and she's
Yeah.
coming into contact and coming into her own. And she's always on YouTube Kids, and so she
Hmm.
sees these other races and how they may look, and they wear makeup, and so she's like, "Oh, I want to wear makeup," and I'm like, "But you don't need makeup.
Hmm.
You're beautiful just the way you are." Her eyebrows are thick and bushy, just like how mine used to be when I was growing up, and so she's like, "But I don't like my eyebrows. Can you pluck?" No, I won't. I'm like, I won't pluck yours so you can be like me, because I didn't pluck mine so much because that was the time where plucking them and tweezing them and all that, was the style, as thin as possible. And so, and now mines won't grow back, and I want them to grow back. But I'm like, keep your eyebrows. I'm like, you in a time where everybody embraces naturally thick eyebrows. Other people got to go get them, the microblading and
Hmm.
put makeup on just to make it thick. But
Yeah.
yours are natural. And so I'm like, everything about you is beautiful. Just pouring that life back into her. And like you said, validating her that there
Hmm.
is nothing wrong with you. You are beautiful just the way that you are. And so that is key, especially in today's society.
Yes, girl, I feel you with them eyebrows because I get some mine. I just got mine waxed today. I get, and one thing is, but one thing I'm glad that my sister's not really into. She just got into makeup, but even with that, I want to instill with her, like, as you said something so big. It's just the instilling that you're beautiful just the way that you are. You don't
Hmm.
have to do this. You don't have to do that, and that's one thing I take from that, and I try to teach her because she. And one thing is like with her, people may pick on her, and I be having to remember I'm grown. I can't go do nothing to them. I'll be like, not her, not what?
Oh
No.
yeah.
I'll be ready to go to bat, but I have to teach her because
Hmm.
when you teach them at home, the world can't teach them nothing out there.
That's right.
The teaching starts at home.
Hmm.
But with teaching her that at home is gonna be so beneficial for them when they go out because now
Hmm.
they can't tell them. You can't validate them. You
Yeah.
can say, well, you need to this. Well, no, because my mom and my sister said I'm at home. I'm beautiful just the way that I am. So I don't really think I
Hmm.
can do that. I'm
Yeah.
good. Like it just builds them up more and more and more. I feel like the more you build yourself up, the more you validate yourself. You wouldn't need validation from other people. You wouldn't need validation from social media. You wouldn't need that validation if you just validate yourself at home. It
Yeah.
starts at home. It starts
Mm.
with you. And like you said, if you ain't got nobody in your corner, get in the mirror and talk to yourself. Encourage
Yeah.
yourself. Speak affirmations over yourself. Because when
Hmm.
you're doing that, you're building yourself up. You're building
Yes.
yourself. And then also don't stop there. Start praying and asking God for him to show you who you are the way he sees you. Because
Yeah.
once you tap into that and you understand that, no you being comfortable in yourself, you're gonna be so better being in isolation because you don't have the need or the desire to
Hmm.
want to change anything.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I'm learning through my because I'm still in isolation. I'm like, God, you don't think I've been isolated? I literally was just thinking about praying this. I was like, God, you don't think I've been in isolation long enough? Like I've been isolated for a long time. Like that's one question I want to ask you. How long do you think isolation is?
Ultimately, it just depends. It really depends on the type of season you are in and how needed it is. For me, it was only a couple of weeks, but
Wow.
it was that couple of weeks that woke me up and was like, okay, girl, you need to get it together. And
Yeah.
so now I purposely put myself in certain isolations just so I can refocus and recenter myself and get that one on one, with God that I need. And so it ultimately just depends on the season that you're in, how needed it is, because sounds like to me you had a very, very very active lifestyle.
I
So,
did. I did. I
you
did.
know, and then, being that you started so young, and now here you are, still at the peak of your 20s, the
Mhm.
top of your 20s. And so now it's going to take that bit of isolation for you to get to a place where you can be comfortable with not being a part of the crowd, because I'm pretty sure there is still a part of you that still wants to be a part of the crowd.
And
And
you, yep, a little small part of me, because like sometimes, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like being at home, but it's just like
mhm,
sometimes I be thinking, okay, yeah, it'll be nice to kind of go out right now, but I go out when I can and when I feel like,
mhm,
but
yeah.
yeah, but
So yeah, it ultimately just depends. Everybody's isolation length, period of time in isolation is different, just depending on that specific season. Because sometimes God will pull you away as a whole, social media, turn off your phone. I need everything. I need you to go into straight blackout,
yes,
no contact. And
nothing,
so
nothing.
sometimes that can be for a year, or
Mhm.
longer than a year. But it ultimately just depends on where it is that you are in life and where he's trying to take you.
Yes, I feel like, see, like, I agree with your answer. There's really no time limit on isolation.
Mhm.
It's always depending on the season, and with different seasons, I feel like when we go through different seasons, there's certain things that we have to learn,
Mhm.
because some things you learn in the previous season, you can use it in the next season,
Yeah.
and then
Yep.
what you learn from that season, you could take it into the next season. Then you could apply what you learned from your previous two seasons to your third season, and all that. When him taking you through isolation, it's
Mhm.
so beneficial for you spiritually and mentally and physically.
Yeah.
Because if
Yeah.
your mind is not right, because I
Mhm.
always say this, I like that your mind is the devil's playground. If he gets your mind, everything else is gonna follow. And I actually
Yeah.
just broke that down in the last episode when I said you have to elevate your mind, you have to change the way
Mhm.
you think. And understanding that is when you're in isolation, it starts with your mind. Because if
Oh
you
yeah.
think wrong about yourself and you think wrong about isolation, you feel like it's a more of some people view isolation as form as punishment
Yeah.
instead of beneficial, instead of growth.
Yeah.
And that's
Yep.
one thing I had to do, because I thought God was punishing me by taking all my friends away and taking everything away from me. And it's just not until like he started explaining to me that I did this for you, because
Mhm.
you never know why God isolates you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes he would never tell you why he isolates you.
Mhm. No.
But I just thank him, like, he saw something that I didn't see. I'm
Yeah.
just seeing it as, oh, you took me away from this. Okay, now I'm about to find me something else to do. He's like, no, I took you away to this because I wanted to save you. I
Mhm.
wanted to wake you up. I wanted to get your attention. This is what he did for me. He's like,
Yeah.
and it's like I was always on the go. I was never still.
Yeah.
And it's not until he had to like really shut everything down for me to realize that, hey, I'm trying to get your attention. Where you're
Mhm.
going, there is no destination. Well, there is a destination,
Mhm.
but you're not going to like that result. I'm trying to get you to understand that you need me. Like,
Yeah.
you're not what you're wanting, I can only give you.
Mhm.
You
Yep.
keep trying these different things and it's not working, but try me and I'm going to work.
Mhm.
It's not until like I had that moment with him and I really understood that. Now, I'm still working through my time of isolation, because I feel like I've been isolated long enough.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, but I I just thank God, like, even though I feel I don't like being isolated, I don't,
Mhm.
because sometimes it does get boring, but I just value, you're not gonna forever be in isolation.
Mhm.
There's gonna be
Yeah.
a time where, like, you move from isolation to like, okay, I've trained you long enough, you're ready. Now it's time
Mhm.
for you to go out and do this.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna look back and like, dang, I wish I was just alone. Like, because I always tell, like, I can't wait for me to move. I can't wait to be on my own. But I feel like
Yeah.
once I'm actually out there and I'm really by myself, I'm gonna be like, dang, I wish you
Yeah.
could just run in my room one more time. You're gonna miss that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I just learned about, like, one thing I'm learning through this season of isolation, because I recently just got through with a season of learning how to be still.
Mhm.
Cause man,
Yeah.
I was the way. my last thing, like the way God got me to be still, literally I had no choice but to be still. I was still
Yeah.
for 6 weeks,
Mhm.
6 weeks of being still. And
Yeah.
throughout that time, I feel like God worked with me even more
Mhm.
because I was dealing with so much at that time.
Yeah.
And I love the way he dealt with me throughout these 6 weeks.
Mhm.
How I got more deeper into him. Like I wanted a deeper commitment with him. I wanted a deeper relationship with him, a deeper understanding of him.
Mhm.
So during this time when he like sat me down for this period, and it was a total of 2 months really, because this
Mm.
happened in August. And literally for 2 months, I couldn't do anything. I
Yeah.
was consumed with house, work, church. That's it. No
Yeah.
social gatherings. I'm just now getting back mobile like how I
Mhm.
was. But even there I still have limitations. And I'm just like, I
Yes.
don't think I want to try God like that no more. I think I'm gonna just I get the message, be still and just but I
Yes.
always see that's one thing I kind of feel with isolation. If you start going backwards and you start trying to do stuff, he's like, okay. He has a way of, like I said, he has a way of getting your attention.
Oh yes.
He
Yes, he
definitely
does.
has a way of getting your attention. And I feel like with me, he called my teacher, like, okay, now, dude, listen, I'm trying to teach you to be still now.
Mhm.
Okay, so you won't be still by listening. I'm one of them hard headed kids. Like I'm one of the kids you gotta pinch a couple, like you gotta dang pinch me a couple of times and really maybe slap me on the back of my neck to make me
Yeah.
catch something. Like I want them hard. I said I'm one of God's special child. He has to spend extra care with me. I'm
Yeah.
one of so some things sometimes God has to deal with me differently, which
Yeah.
sometimes I'm
Mhm.
like, God, you ain't have to do me like that now, but that's the only way I would like understand what was really
Mhm.
happening.
Yeah.
So that's one thing is I'm grateful for learning through my season of isolation, just the different seasons he takes me through. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I want to go through another season of isolation because but I just look at it as what am I learning through in each season. Each
Mhm.
season, every time you're in isolation, there's always something you're learning. It's
Yep.
never a dull moment. It's never you're not learning anything. You learn so much about yourself and about God during isolation. It
Yes.
blows your mind. It
Mhm.
blows your mind. And that's
Yeah.
so many, and that's this whole time I've been isolated. I've learned so much.
And that's
I've
awesome.
grown so much in different areas. I'm just like,
Yeah.
wow, I never thought. And I just think about what if God hadn't isolated me?
Mhm.
If he would have continued to let me be the social person,
Mhm.
what I would have never learned this. I would have
Mm.
never went through that. I would have got the victory over this. I would have never got my breakthrough in that. I never would have been who I am now
Yeah.
if he wouldn't have stopped me.
Mhm. And see,
And
and when you say that, it brings me to the story of Joseph. And
yes,
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Joseph, but with
yes,
Joseph, he was the youngest.
yes.
Before his other brother, of course, but he was the youngest. And so with Joseph, he wanted to be loved by his brothers. He always wanted to be up under his
Mhm,
brother, doing what his brothers was doing. And so, if it hadn't have been for his brothers selling him, if it hadn't have been for, him going through that moment where he was a slave and he
mhm,
had to go through that moment where he was accused, if it hadn't have been for that moment of isolation in prison for however many years and him coming into contact with those people, that set him up to be second in command. It's something about when you in isolation and not only are you learning about yourself, but God will connect you with different people,
mhm,
to be able to pour into. And
yeah,
you never know who you pouring into because the people that he poured into while he was in prison didn't know that he was the cupbearer
mhm,
for the Pharaoh. And so when he spoke into that person, he interpreted his dream, not knowing that he was going to go back to the Pharaoh and tell him, hey, he knew what this was about. Not
mhm,
knowing that the Pharaoh was going to end up having the same type of dreams that he was going to then have to interpret. So I feel like in that season of isolation, you never know. There's always a reason behind it, I should say.
yeah, yes,
You don't know who you're going to come into contact and who you may end up pouring into because in that isolation, you are emptying out all the things that should not be. And then God is pouring into so that you can pour back out. And you
Mm,
don't know who it is that you're pouring back out to and where that is going to lead you. So many open doors happen or open when you are in that season of isolation. So when
yeah.
you come out, that's why I learned how to listen, to hear instead of listen to respond in my moment of isolation, because after my isolation, there are many doors that opened. And I was
Mm,
like, oh, okay, God. I was on like a new fire. I was just like, pew, okay,
yeah.
I got
Ready to
this.
go. Yeah.
So, I would say the isolation is necessary. Because with Joseph, he after his isolation and when he was set into that second command, he was able to save his family and also be reunited with them. He
Yeah.
saved them from famine. God poured into him the wisdom and the tools that he needed to get them
Mm-hmm.
through the
Mm-hmm.
7 years. And so that's one person, that story I love is Joseph, because it lets us know that isolation is necessary.
Yes, I love the story of Joseph. But well, also I love the story of Jonah.
Mm-hmm.
I love how when he was isolated, because he was in that belly of that fish for 3 days and 3 nights, and during those 3 days and 3 nights, God talked to him. He
He
communed
did.
with him. He let him know. He reassured him he had to get back on his assignment. And then once he got spat up, Jonah got on it. He was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I got another chance to get it right. So he went about it. And that's one thing I can relate to, because Jonah was hard headed. He didn't want to do it.
Oh yeah.
He did not want God to deliver them people. He said, these people are breaking you. No, God, we not doing that. But I feel like in those 3 days and 3 nights with him communing with God, he had really time. God had to really sit there and meditate with him and had to let him
Mm.
know about his thoughts and not his thoughts, and what he God intended to do happened. He wanted them
Mm-hmm.
saved. And that's one thing I relate to so much. Is like, with Jonah, I'm just like, that isolation, that 3 days and 3 nights.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it takes longer than that. But with me, the reason why I love that story so much is how he got back on. Like you said, that fire rekindled. It's
Mm-hmm.
like something about when you be rekindled again. It's something about that fire. Once it straight back up, it's like, and it's never the same flame. It's never
Mm-mm.
the same flame.
Mm-mm.
It's like he got back on it, even though the way the ending, Jonah was mad that God
He
saved
sure
him. Like,
was mad.
he was so mad that God saved them. But I just saw the beauty in it. How
Yeah.
God, he's so willing. Yes, God has another side. He is
Mm-hmm.
not the sweet calm. Yes, he's that too, but he also has a side of wrath. And I
Mm-hmm.
would not want to be on that side. But I just see it as how, even though them people still was sinning against, he still gave them an opportunity to make it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just think about, if Jonah, after God spent the well spat him back out, if Jonah didn't do the assignment,
Mm-hmm.
the people never would have been saved.
Yeah.
And I just thank God for like the way Jonah was just obedient and how he got back to it. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you being isolated, it really showed God, like will show you what's really important in life
Mm. Yep.
and why it's important and why you need to be about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because with me, just being real, I know that with me, I have a voice that needs to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a type of person. No, I don't tell you unless you ask me,
Yeah.
which is not a good thing. But the stuff I learned throughout, because like I said, I started young age season of isolation,
Mm-hmm.
and the things I've learned, I've came encounter with so many different young people that look up to me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's weird. It's at first I thought it was weird. I was just like, why? Like, why are you looking up to me? Like, but I see the beauty in it,
Yeah.
because I have so many. I get younger people too, and
Mm-hmm.
I always find myself talking to somebody that's a year too younger than me, and I always try to tell them, don't do that. I've been out there. I like how your mom would come and like, don't do that, baby. I done did
Mm-hmm.
that before. I see myself doing the same thing,
Yeah.
just pouring back into them
Yeah.
as God was pouring into me. And I
Mm-hmm.
saw how during those 3 days and 3 nights, God poured into Jonah.
Yeah.
Because Jonah was able to go out and pour into those people.
Mm-hmm.
Those people were able to hear it and
Yeah.
act on it.
Mm-hmm.
So through my season of isolation, when I looked at the story of Jonah, I'm just like, God pours into me. So that way, when I go out, I can pour into other people.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
because we all have a story to tell, and we all,
Mhm.
what we're going through and what we've been through can help somebody else that's going through.
Mhm.
And that's one thing I started to learn with the different people that I encounter. I
Yeah.
at least try. If I can't do nothing else, I try to at least let them see my side of how what I've
Yeah.
went through, especially what I'm going through.
Mhm.
I try to tell people, hey, you don't want to do this, because certain things don't become real to you until you actually go through it,
Yeah.
and all
That's
the stuff
true.
you've been taught, you got to actually put to use.
Mhm.
Some people can be some people can be filled with the word, but when you get hit with that trial and you ain't got nobody to call on, nobody to pray with you, you got
Mhm.
to do that for yourself. And that's
Yep.
one thing I had to learn, because I was always quick to call somebody to pray with me, call somebody to encourage me, but it's not until God isolated me, and I'm just like, well, you've been taught this, you've been taught that. The same power
Mhm.
they have, you have it too.
Sure do.
You can encourage yourself. You can speak to your storm and tell your storm to cease. Like you
Yes.
can do it too.
Mhm.
So that's, I feel like in all seasons, that's something everybody needs to learn.
Mhm. Yeah.
You have to know that, speak it to yourself.
Yeah.
Learn it yourself. Because when it's time to use it, you gotta be able to use it.
Mhm.
It's gonna be times where we can't call, we can't text, we can't do nothing. It's gonna be times
Yeah.
where we ain't gonna have nobody to encourage, and all the
Exactly.
things. I feel like God puts you in different isolation seasons to prepare you for what's upcoming,
Mhm.
to prepare you for
Yes.
what's coming near you. So when
Mhm.
you enter it, you already been prepared. You ready
Mhm.
at this point. Now you got to do is apply it and exercise it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's one thing I learned. I was like, when it got time for me, I was like, well, I can't call nobody to pray for me. I got to pray for myself.
Mhm.
And when you exercise in you exercise in prayer, you understand
Yeah.
you getting a prayer life now. I said, okay, sometimes things don't. You pray your way through. Now you got to encourage yourself. Find you some scriptures to stand on that relates to your situation, and stand on and meditate on it. Once
Yes.
you do that, then you fired up. You ready to go.
Mhm.
That's
Yep.
one thing I learned. That's how I'm so grateful I learned, because God had to really show me and isolate. Like He said, you could call in, you telling people to call on me for you, and you could call me yourself. And sometimes God will isolate you because He wants you to call upon Him.
Yes.
Because you
Yes.
all, like I said, I was quick to get somebody to pray for me. I was like, Mama, can you pray with me real quick? Such and such, can you pray with me real quick?
Mhm.
Sometimes God will isolate you because He wants to hear from you. Is
Mhm.
I was one of those people. I ain't gonna lie. I was one of those people. I only call on God when I got in trouble and I wanted out of a situation. That's the only time
Yeah.
God heard from me. But sometimes God will put you in a season of isolation, because
Mhm.
he don't want to just hear you when things are going good or when
Right.
you want out. He want to hear you on a daily basis.
Yes.
He want to hear your cares, your thoughts,
Yeah.
because He tells us in His words to cast our cares upon Him because He cares for us.
Mhm. Yeah.
He wants you to talk to Him. He wants to
Mhm.
have a relationship with you.
Yes.
It goes beyond just, oh God, get me out of this, and God, I promise you get me out of this, I would never do it again.
Yes. Making
That
empty
was,
promises.
yes. Yes. But
Mhm.
that is something I actually dealt with and actually was doing. So I
Mhm.
know when God took me through, I had
Yeah.
to learn, like, okay, God, you just want more than just fit. 2 minutes of me saying, hey, God, get me out of this, and they're like, God, I ain't gonna do it again. Find myself in the same
Yeah.
position. It's just
Yes.
that is something that I learned, and I'm grateful that I learned, because now I have a
Mhm.
better relationship with Him. I talk to Him on a daily basis, even if it's not for a long period of time like I wanted to. It's just the fact that I'm taking time out of my day to just spend time with Him,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's all He wants, because He's gonna do His part. He's gonna do
Mhm.
His part, but we got to
Yeah.
do our part.
Yep.
We
Just give
have to
him
do
some
our
of it. Yeah.
And that's something you can learn during isolation. And like, I feel like the more time you spend with God, the more time you spend time with yourself and put yourself
Mhm.
first and understand your worth, your self-love. You have
Yeah.
boundaries.
Mhm.
You know, can't nobody take that from you. Don't get me wrong, they're gonna try. You're gonna have people to try you. And
Yes.
Jesus, I I literally be like, "Oh, y'all just better be lucky that
Yeah.
I just got out of meditation. God, you gonna have to help me." Cause it be funny, but literally, that is something like once you learn that the joy that you have being in isolation
Yeah.
and just having that time, you're building
Mhm.
yourself up because it's
Yeah.
gonna be a time where you're like I said, you're not gonna be isolated.
Mhm.
Get married, you're gonna go do this, or God may put you on an assignment
Yeah.
to where He may take you away from people that you're comfortable with.
Mhm.
It's in however God chooses to take you out of isolation to put you in what you put you on what you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
You got to know what to do. So
Yep.
all that time you was in isolation, you was prepping yourself. We was getting you together, we was building you up. Now it's time for you to put what you learned to use.
Yep.
And then you gonna be the time like, dang, I wish I was just back in my season of isolation. Don't. That's another thing I want to point out. And I don't rush. Don't be so quick to rush out of isolation.
Oh yeah.
Do not rush the process. Please
Mm-mm.
do not, because I'm telling you, I tried to rush the process. Like, God, you know what? If you don't get me out this season, I'm gonna go. And every time I find this, every time you try to get out of isolation, it's
Yeah.
always something going on.
Mhm.
You always like, and then with me, I like being isolated. I never realized I like being isolated. I never realized that because even when I try to get out my isolation stage, I'm like, I don't want to do that. I
Yeah.
want to just go back to being isolated because one thing about me, like I said, I value time and peace, and I'm
Yeah.
so protective over it. I'm like, my peace
Mhm.
is so important to me. I cannot be. I have my own, but I got my own battles to fight and deal. I
Exactly.
can't deal with your battles and my battles and some more
Mhm.
battles. I can't deal with that. But I just
Yes.
love the quietness, the space, the time where I can just commune with God. Because I know it's gonna
Mhm.
be a time where God go, He's gonna take me out of isolation, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
always be around somebody, and I'm gonna be like, God, can you just put me like, just give me like 5 minutes by myself, God? I can't even think
Yeah.
straight.
Mhm.
But
Yes. Yes.
don't rush isolation. Get all you could get out of being isolated.
Right.
Learn as much as you can about God and yourself in isolation.
Yeah.
Because when it comes time for you to put what you learn to use, you gotta stand. You gotta look at your lessons and be able to go from there. You gotta
Yes.
know, stand on what you've been taught, stand on what you believe in, and be able to declare it, decree it, and proclaim it, and walk
Yes.
it out
Yes.
and all that. You go look back and say, you know what? Even though I didn't like isolation, I am so grateful that I learned this, that, or the other.
Yes.
Because you
Yes.
never know what you have to face up ahead. That
Mhm.
what God was preparing you for. You would
Mhm.
know.
Yep. You're gonna be so appreciative. You'll be like, oh, thank you, Lord.
Yes, you done gave me the revelation in this area.
Yes.
So now
Uh-huh.
I know how to face that giant. I got
Mhm. Yes.
it. I
Yes.
did.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I can embrace. One thing I would leave, I want us to, I want to say is for everybody that's in their season of isolation, is to embrace it.
Yeah.
You may not understand it at first. You're not going to understand it at first, but embrace it.
Mhm.
Take it and don't just see it as punishment. Don't
Yeah.
see it as, oh, why?
Mhm.
Just go after it. Get curious about why you're isolated.
Mhm.
Figure out what can I learn about myself in isolation. Start asking questions about yourself. Start
Yeah.
really spending time to know yourself. Look at different things, read
Mhm.
different books, and
Yeah.
really learn yourself.
Mhm.
Learn more things about yourself, and then of course spend time with God, because it's like
Yeah.
it's can't get over the fact there's gonna be a time where we're gonna wish we could do all we can do, but we can't.
Mhm.
And if you're
Yep.
gonna reflect on those times when you had the opportunity, but you didn't take it.
Yeah.
Get all you can get out of it. Get all you can
Yes.
possibly can out of it, because when it's time to use it, you gotta use it.
Mhm.
Because what was like that, I see it as if you're playing a game and you did all that practice, when it's time to get on the court and actually do something, and you can't do it, then what was you practicing for?
Exactly.
What? So why would you? It's such a season of isolation for so long with all
Yeah.
that teaching, all that stuff, just to get to the game, and you can't. You don't know
And
what
you
to do.
unprepared. Yep.
You
Mhm.
unprepared. I just isolation, embrace it, learn from
Yes.
it, enjoy it, because it's gonna come a time where you are not going to have that time by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to just embrace it. Embrace
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, and I will also say to write. In my time of isolation, I wrote everything down. Whatever the
Mhm.
spirit spoke, I was writing it. So
Yes.
take that time to journal. Not only journal what the spirit is given, but just journal what's on your mind. Journal what it is that you want to change. Journal what it is that you've learned. You
Mhm.
know, journaling is I would say it's essential.
It,
When I was in therapy, my counselor was saying, just imagine when you write that everything is being taken out on this paper and the paper is just absorbing all of it. And so I found, you know, how much that worked, and so I will say, write everything down. Write everything that is given to you, whatever it is that you think of, right? Because that's your time. And then when you are out of isolation, you can go back and reflect on those things.
yes, that is so true.
Yeah.
But that is all we have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the season of isolation. Also, Nathania, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you taking this
Of
time out to be a
course.
part of the show. You guys, I'm gonna post down. She has a page. I want you guys to go like, show her some love, and thank her for just taking the time out to be with us on the show. Now, guys, just remember to be you. Just be the real you, and don't let nobody else change you. And also, just keep it real with yourself. Hashtag just keep it real with yourself. Hashtag just keep it real. Hashtag it's the real one TV. And also, just remember to embrace your season of isolation.
Yeah.
Be comfortable with your season of isolation and don't rush your isolation process. Thank you guys for tuning in. I love you guys, and we'll see you guys season 1, episode 3.
Bye.
Bye.